Hey everybody, Mark Allard-Will here. So thank you for joining me today. I am joined today by Matt Smith. Unfortunately, we have had some issues technology-wise, so unfortunately we can't have Matt's video, but you will hear Matt's audio, so you will get the interview in that way. And you are missing out because Matt is a very handsome chap. So sorry about that. So again, my name is Mark Allard-Will. I'm a comic book writer. So if you're new here, thank you for joining us. Um, I am not by myself today, as I alluded to. I'm actually joined by fellow Canadian cartoonist and all-round mensch, Matt Smith. Matt, can you introduce yourself and your work as a cartoonist to our viewers, please?
Yeah, hey, sorry that no one can see me because I did shave today and I put on clean clothes, which is not always a given in these times with everyone being stuck at home. But yeah, I'm a cartoonist. I have kind of three types of books that I do. I've got autobiographical comics that are true stories, a lot of true stories about me, my wife, and our cats traveling around the world. That's my Smith versus Smith series. And then for the last couple of years, I've started to write horror stories for other artists. So I'm more of a writer in that respect and team up with different artists from around the world for my gruesome comics horror series. And then I have my interactive instructional books in my Let's Draw Some Comics series. So those are the three kind of avenues that I create comics in.
Wonderful. And Matt, it's fair to say that your long-running webcomic, Smith versus Smith, is your most well-known work. It's a comedy slice of life comic strip, and it functions as a webcomic, as I alluded to there. It's available to read free online at smithversussmith.com. But can you
Mhm.
tell us how that comic got its start and how you ended up on landing on webcomic format as opposed to traditional media?
Yeah, when you and I first met, we realized how much we had in common. One thing we had in common was a background in film. I went to film school before I started making comics. After film school, I found it really difficult to keep making movies because it costs a lot of money. You need a lot of other people to help on a crew. You need a lot of time, and you need a lot of fancy, expensive equipment. And I didn't always have access to equipment or other people's time or money. But I still want to tell stories visually. So when I went to university, the University of Victoria, after I completed film school, I still wanted to tell stories visually. So I realized that I could do that with comics in a way that didn't require other people to help me. It didn't require tons of expensive equipment. And it was a pretty quick turnaround. So I started making comics for the university newspaper, the UVic Martlet. And then when I had those comics in print, I would then put them online. So I had a Smith versus Smith webcomic, and then when I had enough of those, I actually started collecting them and printed my first comic collection. And that's how I got into printing comics. Is I would take those web comics and newspaper comic strips and just put them into a book.
Wonderful. And so when you talk about a book, that is obviously very different to the webcomic format. Why the webcomic format in particular?
I just wanted a way to share the comics quickly and easily. I spent my whole life growing up overseas, so I have family and friends all over the world. And a webcomic is just a really quick way to share what you're making with a lot of people immediately, regardless of time zone, regardless of where you are in the world. So the webcomic, there's power in that you can quickly get something on the internet and suddenly anyone can access it from all around the world. The webcomic has kind of lapsed because of other projects. I've been teaching a lot more, and I've been spending the last couple months working on my first full-length graphic novel, which is born out of that webcomic. But when I was doing the webcomic kind of a couple times a week, I was really utilizing social media and getting the comic out on there. And again, just finding an audience through social media was just really immediate and really great. And a really great community of other artists and cartoonists on the internet, and you find that through social media, and you find that when you share it online.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got to be honest, I love Smith versus Smith. One
Thanks,
of,
man.
yeah, it's awesome. One of my fondest memories is when we first met in person after years of knowing each other online at
Yeah.
VanCAF, the Vancouver Comic Arts Festival. and meeting Emma, who is essentially famous now because of Smith versus Smith. And it was that kind of humor of trying to figure out if she doesn't realize she's famous or if she's just really humble.
No, Emma is great. Lots of obviously lots of support and encouragement, but also just lots of free material. I love doing an autobiographical webcomic because I don't need to think of I don't need to sit down and actually think of ideas. I just wait for my wife to say something, and I just make a little note of it, and then I'll show it to her a few days later. And hey, you remember when you said that? And sometimes she'll say, I didn't say that. I'm like, yeah, you did. I took a note of it. Don't worry. But I always make sure. I've learned the hard way. I always get her to approve everything that features her, just to make sure that she admits or remembers it the same way that I remember it, so there's no arguments later. But it's funny attending comic conventions with Emma because she's lovely and very personable and very charming, so she is great for talking to readers and bringing people to the table, but she's not into comics at all. So she really likes talking about a comic series where she's the star, but she gets a little bored when anyone wants to talk about any other comic at all because she doesn't read superhero stuff. She reads a few autobio comics that I pass along, but if someone wants to talk comics with her, unless she's the star, she usually is kind of bored and doesn't have much to add. But she does love being the star of the comic series, I think. I think she does get a kick out of that.
That's awesome. And we'll just move on to the next section now. Much like myself, you're also a writer, and you've also been quite prolific as well. So you've written for anthology graphic novels, you've written your own horror comics, your own sci-fi comics.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody was watching this, say, and they were a novice writer and they were looking to bisect into writing for comic books, what would your advice be for them beginning that process?
Yeah, I always just say, just make a comic, man. You learn so much through just making it. So whether it's, and I do recommend starting small, and I know that's hard to hear sometimes when someone's got an idea for this multi-part epic series that will last for years, or like a 300-page graphic novel. But when you're just starting to make a comic, just, narrow your scope a bit, just put some words down, put some drawings down, and just make a comic, whether it's like a one-page strip or a couple pages. You learn so much, I think, through just making the comic, and you figure out what works for the writing, what works for the drawing. And if you're an artist and a writer, then just go for it. Just start experimenting, just start creating something. I mean, I've got tons of comics that I'm embarrassed to look at, but it got me making stuff, and got me to the next comic and the next comic after that. If you're just a writer, it's a bit more difficult because obviously comics are a very, very visual medium. But again, just figure out a way to make it. Whether you find an artist and you team up with that artist and you go into it as a partnership, or there's tons of ways of finding artists to hire. Whether it's through different fan art pages or DeviantArt, or just going to conventions and just talking to artists. And if you find an artist and you dig their work, just asking, hey, would you be willing to team up? Or, hey, what are your rates for pages? And just, if you need someone to help translate your ideas into an image, then find that person. And, cartoonists, you can find them. Well, when we can all go outside again and when the conventions are running, you can find cartoonists at conventions. And, if you are someone who wants to write and you want to hire an artist, artists are looking for work all the time. They're looking to get hired. So it won't be, if you're willing to pay their page rate, it's not going to be hard to convince someone to work with you.
Absolutely. And that's wonderful advice. Thank you, Matt. So something else you do is you also teach comic book art and kind of the fundamentals of that in schools around the world. Could you tell us a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah. So I was a teacher, and my wife and I decided to take a year off from school, from teaching, and went back to school to become students ourselves. And I was focusing on comics and she was focusing on art. And at the end of that year, she went back to teaching and she said, okay, you've got a year to figure out how to make money in comics. Otherwise, you got to go back to teaching or do something else. So I was excited, but didn't really know what that would mean. As you know, it's very difficult to make money and sustain it in comics. But I kind of lucked out that I do have this teaching background, and I have friends who teach in schools all around the world. So I started approaching schools and contacting schools and librarians, and now I visit schools. That's my day job. My main source of income is visiting schools and teaching students from kindergarten all the way through university, and I even have workshops for adults and for teachers on making comics. And it's really fun because it combines my love of travel, it combines my teaching with a bit of performance, and also obviously comics. And it's just really cool because you just get this like unfiltered creativity, and if you walk into a classroom and say, hey guys, today we're making comics, instantly you've got the entire like classroom on your side and everyone gets excited. It's not a hard sell to tell a classroom, today we're making a comic. And it's just really cool, and it's helped me too just kind of break down what are the important building blocks. And I think we're still figuring out the power of comics and the potential and what comics can do. And I really like seeing the realization that anyone can make a comic, and it's not about being a fantastic artist all the time. It's about communicating ideas and just giving that power and giving that permission to experiment and just go ahead and make something. It's really powerful, and it's really creative and really cool to see just the range of stories and art styles, and it's an amazing. I love my job.
That's fantastic. It's really inspiring to see, actually, when I look on social media and I see that you've done classes for hire in like Kuwait, Japan, the United States of America, all over the world. Germany, I think you did Germany as well. Was it? Am I right?
Yeah, I made it to Munich, which was fantastic. It was an amazing school. And I got to work with a wide range of students in elementary, middle school, and high school, which is always kind of cool. High school kids, a lot of the times, they've got a million things on their mind. They got exams coming up, and you walk in and you say, hey, we're making comics. Isn't that cool? And sometimes they'll kind of roll their eyes, and then I push it even further. I'm like, come on, we're excited. We're making comics. And they kind of roll their eyes. And then I do the lesson, and then at the end, when I give them time to sit down and draw, they're all into it. And it's rare for high school students to get that time to kind of play in school. So that's really exciting for me, that you've got a group of high schoolers that might be a little bit skeptical, not quite sure what I'm all about, but when I give them time to actually make something and draw, like it's silent, everyone's head down, working and drawing. It's really cool.
That's awesome. So I was hoping that this interview would, of course, be a distraction from the current world, but at some point you can't ignore it. So my next question does address that. So with this global quarantine going on right now, physical comic distribution via Diamond is one of the things that has paused, one of the many things that has paused. So it's rumored, should I say, that DC Comics have sent a letter to comic book shop owners saying that they're looking at alternate distribution options instead of Diamond going forward. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't keep up, honestly, with monthly comics. I am busy working on my own stuff, and honestly, comics are an expensive hobby, and I think if I was if I let into my impulses to buy monthly comics, then I would go broke instantly. I'm very curious about what this means going forward, whether this means maybe this is our time to shine as independent creators, and I'm hoping maybe that is something positive that might come out of this disruption. But I'm worried about, obviously, comic book stores, because they've been fantastic to me. I have moved several times for the last couple of years since I started making comics, and local comic book stores are always just huge supporters everywhere I've been, in Victoria, in Vancouver, in Scotland, here in Glasgow. Local comic book store owners are just so supportive of local creators, and it's great. And there's always like a local creator bookshelf, and they have signings, and they have local creator nights, and here in the UK we have Small Press Day, and Forbidden Planet Glasgow is a huge supporter of that. And in Victoria, Legends Comics, run by Gareth Godin, like, he's let me have signings there. Like, no one knows who I am, but he let me have a signing, so that's awesome. I can say I've had a signing in a comic book store in Canada and in Scotland. So I hope that this gets sorted out just so comic book stores can stay afloat and this doesn't affect them too much. And I hope that this isn't a huge impact on comic book stores because they support me and I want to support them. But I do hope that maybe this is time for people to look and see what else is out there that maybe doesn't need to be distributed or isn't distributed through Diamond. Like, you know, I'm trying to think of my words. Sorry. I have a book right now funding through Kickstarter, and I'll be sending that out directly. So I'm not going through a distributor. That's me self-publishing. I've got a printer here in the UK, and then I'll be sending it out myself personally. So, you know, I've bypassed any kind of distribution service. So that's cool that there still are ways to get comics right now. And I'm selling, you know, I've got my digital storefront. And so there are ways to still get comics. And I hope that people say you've read all the Batman comics, you're caught up month by month, and now you got nothing left. There's no more Batman. Give one of us a try. Go see what else is out there. And if you just scroll through cartoonists on Instagram or Facebook right now, everyone is saying like, "Hey, you want material? I've got material. You want something to read? I've got stuff." So there is stuff out there that maybe hasn't been discovered yet, but now's the time that everyone's sitting at home. They need something to read, and it's not coming from Diamond. So, you know, dig a little deeper, see what else is out there.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point that you end on there, that there are so many indie creators that skip the distribution platform entirely and go with Kickstarter and Indiegogo and webcomics. And, you know, free-to-read webcomics, stuff on Kickstarter and Indiegogo is stuff that you can still get hold of right now. And what I'd add to that point is if you look in the description of this live video, you can find a link to Matt's Kickstarter for You're Stuck With Me Now. It's also based around the Smith versus Smith universe with Emma there, slice of life comedy. And it's
if I could just jump in, You're Stuck With Me Now is my first long form graphic novel. Like I said, it's one complete story. I've kind of been promoting it as the origin story for me and Emma. So I was doing Smith versus Smith comics before I met Emma, but I had taken a break for a couple of years. And then when I met her, we fell in love, started dating. And when we got engaged, I sent out a 2-page comic as our save the date. And then during the year of our engagement, I started making more and more comics. By the time we got married, I had a 60-page little booklet that was our wedding favor at the wedding. So everyone got, instead of chocolates or cakes, they got this little comic about us. And since then, I've added to it and changed and reformatted pages and redrawn some pages. So it's now a 120-page graphic novel. It's all about how we met. It starts on the day we met, leading up through to the wedding. There's also the origin story of how we found our cats, who are a big part of the Smith versus Smith comics as well. So check out my webcomic if you haven't read any of my stuff before. You can get tons of free Smith versus Smith comics. But if that's the kind of thing you dig and you like, you know, me and Emma as comic characters, then, you know, give the Kickstarter a look. We got 4 more days until the Kickstarter closes. It's going strong. But, you know, if you're stuck at home, you can't get any comics through DC or Marvel or Image, you want something new, come check out Smith versus Smith and You're Stuck With Me Now.
And I would absolutely recommend it. All of Matt's stuff is hilarious, very funny, and yeah, like Matt says, it's live until April 10th. But before we finish up here, I want to open it to audience questions. So I've got the Facebook Live here, and I'll just read them out to you when they come through.
Okay.
So feel free to type those through. Do you have any?
Don't know.
Lots of comments, no questions. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, any questions, just ask them, and I will ask them out to Matt here live.
I am seeing some familiar names listing in, so that's very nice. Joseph Granzo, my friend who's in Mexico. I think my parents are on. I think Emma might be listening in the living room.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can ask you some questions, man. How are you guys?
Sure. Yeah, we're getting on fine. Yeah, Lane and I are fine. Getting on okay. I mean, it's a global quarantine, so it's also affecting here in Canada. So just for people watching, I'm here in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, in Canada. So we kind of traded places. You're originally from Vancouver, and I was originally from Suffolk in the UK, Suffolk in England, and we kind of traded places. I've also lived around the world, like in New Zealand and places like that. But yeah, we're doing okay. It is what it is at the moment. And yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, we're doing okay, keeping each other entertained, which is to say that I'm annoying Elaine a lot. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, other than that, just trying to get back into writing again for a little while here, and working out daily, trying to stay healthy and eat a good varied diet. Just
It's good.
the
Well,
human stuff we can control right now, right?
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
speaking of, you know, driving your spouse crazy, we've got a question from my brother Andrew Roy, and he asked if I see myself making a comic based on the quarantine, and I've been struggling with that question because I do write slice of life autobiographical comics, and I do write about what's happening to me, but yeah, I don't know, because I feel like part of the reason that we create is because we have a unique point of view and we have a unique experience that we need to share, because we want to make a unique experience more universal. But this is weird because this is kind of the opposite, and this is such a universal experience, and I just don't know yet if I have anything unique to say, because like you said, we're all going through it and it's this worldwide situation. So I think it's definitely an interesting thing. I might be too close to it right now to really be able to form any kind of coherent thoughts or say anything that's unique. But I don't know. What I have been doing is I'm working on some scripts that I haven't been working on for a while, that have been sitting in the back of my mind. And I'm seeing some parallels between the quarantine and the self-isolation. So I'm kind of think I'm going to try and get my thoughts out through another story that's not about the quarantine, but get my feelings of being stuck at home out through that.
Yeah.
I got another question.
Yeah. Is this your dad, John Smith?
John Smith is my dad. Yes, he's asked who my funniest character is. I know she's listening. Emma is gold. She's pure comedy gold. I have been able to cruise on her thoughts and her opinions for years now. So my wife is hilarious, and she just makes it easy to be funny, because I have several comics where my character doesn't even say anything. It's just me transcribing a conversation she kind of had with herself, and I didn't even have to respond. I was just like stared at her and made a note and then had to draw it up because there's nothing I could have added. So my wife is definitely the funniest character in the Smith versus Smith comics.
And then Emma asks, when are you going to make a kids comics about the cats?
Yes, Emma wants me to make a comic that will sell to kids, because kids like to buy comics, and so she really wants me to make a story about our two cats, Neo and Thor, going on adventures. And I know that would probably be a very popular book, but she gets frustrated because I'm looking at my wall of Post-it notes for ideas, and it's like an existential story of a production assistant in Vancouver during the writer's strike of 2007, dealing with his place in life and questioning his existence. And I know that's not going to be, I can't sell that to kids at schools. They're not going to be interested in that. So I know that cute cat stories would sell well, but I don't know. I'm kind of taking this time. We can't do anything else, so I might as well write something that really means something to me. So at some point, maybe I'll try to be a bit more commercial and make Emma a bit more money. There's one question we missed from Lisa. She asked where I am now. And my wife and I, Emma, moved to Renfrew outside of Glasgow in July. So Emma's Scottish. We met in Kuwait. That's actually what a lot of the book is about. You're Stuck With Me Now starts with us both teaching in Kuwait, and we met through community theater. But Emma's Scottish, I'm Canadian and /British. And after 10 years of teaching overseas, Emma wanted to move home So we moved back to Scotland in July, and we're close to Emma's family, which is very frustrating now that we moved here to be closer to them, and they're 15 minutes away and we can't see them. But when everything clears up, like we have been having them over for dinner, so that's been really good. So we're in Scotland now.
Awesome. So is Andrew Roy your brother?
Yes, that is my brother.
So Andrew asks, when will you be featuring your inspirations for Smith versus Smith, aka your brother?
So when I first wanted to make comics, I wanted to team up with someone because, again, the background from film, it was always like a collaborative process, and it was always, teaming up with someone and working together. And I wanted to find maybe a partnership for comics. So I said, hey, let's make comics together, because my brother is an artist. I didn't have an artistic background. And I said, you're the artist. Let's make something. So we talked about doing comics together. And the first book and the first web comics are all stories about me and my brother hanging out and our friends in college. And there's debate over who came up with the title. My brother still claims it was his title. I thought my cousin gave me the idea. But Smith versus Smith originally was like me and my brother, like Andrew Smith versus Matthew Smith. And then he didn't really ever make comics with me. So it became more of this existential, the common man versus the common man, my own worst enemy. And now that I'm married, it's, there's two Smiths again. It's Matt and Emma Smith. But my brother, he complains that he's not in the comic enough. But, I gave him the opportunity 10, 11 years ago to make comics with me. So it's on him.
So have we just opened up a controversy by starting the debate of where the name came from?
No, I think I shut him down. If he wants to be your next guest, then he can get on and he can defend his ideas.
Awesome. So Olivia Roberts asks, did you have any film story ideas that made it into your comics?
Yeah. Hi, Olivia. Olivia is my friend from comic school in Camosun. Yeah, so the course that Olivia and I both took, we had to do writing courses, a fiction course and a nonfiction course, and I used that as an opportunity to write down a lot of these long-form sort of graphic novel ideas that I had. And, they could be films, but I do like that they are going to be graphic novels. The story about the production assistant in Vancouver who just kind of realizes that he's stuck in a rut and isn't really progressing creatively and progressing in his career. I think that could have at one point been a movie, but I do like the idea of using a different medium, the medium of comics, to look at the medium of film and kind of taking it apart from a different way. A lot of the short stories, the horror stories, I think could be it could be similar to like little short horror films. So I do think of it in that kind of way. But as far as like leftover film ideas, not so much. Everything kind of you pick and choose, and little germs and little nuggets come from everywhere. So I'm sure something's made it in that at one point was, that'd be a really cool film idea. But I do see them as being intrinsically tied because it is a visual medium and another visual medium. So, there definitely are similarities.
Yeah. Well, like you alluded to at the start here, a lot of our friendship has been formed around how a lot of our life has had eerie similarities, both with traveling around the world, living around the world, mm-hmm. And then with comic books, and of course with our educations in film. So yeah, I like you say, yeah, I do see those as being the same things, the comic book and film. And I just love the idea that you can do a lot of things in comic books that would be hundreds of millions of dollars to achieve in a film. So that I can achieve that as somebody who's, a working man. I don't have to go and try and get into Hollywood to achieve that. That's something that's really cool about it.
Well, there's also, the old cliche of an artist saying, there's no budget in film. It's just as easy for me to write a battle scene with 1,000 warriors fighting in medieval clothes. It's just the same as, writing two guys talking. There's I don't need to, pay for that. And the artist is just looking at him and about to kill him. And I always laugh because your fantastic graphic novel, Burning Black, with Ryan Howe and Elaine but I was just making so much fun of Ryan because you share the script where it starts with a 100,000 person medieval battle, and page one, Ryan has to draw all these medieval knights, and it's this entire battle scene. And I was just like, oh man, Mark is really, really sticking it to you there.
Yeah, I gave him the hardest work right at the start of the story there, and then it goes progressively easier for him. But
Yeah.
yeah, he did not enjoy drawing all of those armies, and I did hear about it. Oh yeah, Elaine's just off camera here, and she was the colorist, and she was saying that she enjoyed it because it was only a few shades, so she got the easiest work out of that. And yeah, um, but that
I mean,
was yeah.
but luckily, it's fantastic. Like that
Thank you.
graphic novel is awesome, and Ryan is amazing, and Elaine's fantastic. But the thing I mean, yeah, you very much front loaded it with this massive battle. But the thing I love the most, just talking about Burning Black, is like the last, I don't know, like 30 something pages. They're just like this one intense like action scene of the Black Shuck going through this town, and like just the kineticism of the story, and like the pacing is fantastic on your end, and the colors are amazing, but the art, it just picks up. And I'm sure, Ryan had tons of fun with the last part, as much as he was maybe, cursing you for the first scene. Like that last segment where just things kick off is awesome.
Well, yeah, thank you for the really kind words there. But yeah, it's he did enjoy it, yeah, because he's like me, he's a bit of a history nerd,
Yeah.
and we had long conversations about how he really enjoyed researching how the town of Bungay in Suffolk looked in, 1577, and that was something that we kind of really shared together was that the research and me as the writer and the researcher sending that research package to him and him figuring out how that had to look. Um, so he did enjoy that a lot because his main project, Daisy Blackwood, which again is a free
Also
webcomic,
amazing.
yeah, that is kind of like I wouldn't say alternate history, it's a kind of fictional history. But it's set in a nondescript 1940s North America, and he did a lot of historical research for that, and that's something that he took great enjoyment in as well.
Yeah, so I mean, if anyone here is listening and they haven't checked out Ryan's work, Daisy Blackwood is fantastic. It's a free webcomic. He's done several volumes now, and the way that he described it to me, and I was like, "That's perfect, man." It's Tailspin meets Indiana Jones meets Buffy. So it's like strong female protagonist who's flying a old junk, seaplane and fighting monsters and daring do's and adventure, and it's all ages and it's fantastic. So that's Daisy Blackwood. So if you're looking for more stuff, like I said, check out Ryan's stuff. It's awesome.
Yeah, and it's also free to read, which is
Yeah.
fantastic during this global quarantine. Just go to daisyblackwood.com. In fact, let me just type it in the comments here quickly.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah, it's you'd be amiss to miss it. It's yeah, the description that you talked about there is the perfect way to describe it. So there you go, just in the comments there.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions for Matt or even for myself? Or...
Thanks for the questions, everyone. That was really nice. It's getting some audience participation.
Yeah, there were some questions. I love the sense of humor of your friends and family. It's awesome.
If he was that funny, he should make comics. So, nah, I think we're good. Okay.
All right. Well, thanks for joining me today, Matt, and thanks everyone for watching. Yeah, it's been awesome. Again, sorry that you've just been watching me. I know I'm not the most entertaining person in the world, but it's because we did have a technical issue here.
I'll share another picture. Can I share it in the comments?
A picture of yourself, because otherwise you're missing out. Matt is a handsome man. So there you go.
I'll see if I can share one more picture at the end, just so you get the idea. But man, Mark, thanks, man.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's a real pleasure.
It's difficult. one of the things that we're missing out on as cartoonists, we spend so much time working alone or working at home and collaborating virtually, and then convention season is kind of the time that we get to go out into the wild and actually see our friends and talk the biz and connect with like-minded people. And I'm really feeling it now. I'm feeling the distance between not just my family and friends, but also like the cartoonists. And it's a bummer that Bandcap's canceled and other conventions aren't happening. So like, I think you're doing something really cool. You're trying to find a way to reach out and to still have that shared experience. And as a fellow cartoonist and someone who's also bored at home, I appreciate what you're doing, man. So
thank you.
Thank you.
I really appreciate that. So thanks for joining us today, everyone. We'll be back with another interview with Jeff Martin, who is a cartoonist, really funny guy as well, from Edmonton in Canada. So we'll have some information on the page about that soon, but we'll see you soon.
All right, man. Take care.
Thank you.
Like, share, subscribe.